Hello everyone, it's me, the anime and Catholic guy, and today we are going to be breaking down Fate's Jeanne d'Arc, and basically making a Catholic guide to this character, giving my kind of thoughts on the character, and other things like that. So, basically, to start things off, Jeanne d'Arc is actually a saint, if you didn't know that. She is one of the saints from France, so she is actually like the I think patron of France, pretty much. And so yeah, there's a bunch of historical details about her. Basically, she became a very well-known military leader and fought alongside a lot of things in the Hundred Years' War, which I believe was when Britain and the Kingdom of Britain was invading France, trying to take over France. So they kind of had to defend it, and it lasted a whole long time. A lot of struggles, little fights, big fights, everything beyond that. But what really stands out about Jeanne d'Arc is how she kind of ended up meeting her end. So she pretty much just stood up to, I guess, the church in several ways, and they didn't like that a lot. So she ended up getting burned on the stake. Basically, they were saying that, oh yeah, she was just kind of lying and stuff. She basically would claim that she would be judged by God alone, pretty much, which, if you didn't know anything about the Catholic Church around that time in history, they were kind of stuck up, that's what I would say, and not necessarily being very merciful or seeking truth. They pretty much were trying to hold on to power a bit in this kind of section, and like social stuff got kind of messy around this time as well. Also, I should probably put my pointer on. Yeah, here we go, laser pointer. This is what I used the last time. But yes, so now that pretty much gets us into other depictions of Jeanne. So there's actually like movies that have been made about her story. And so yeah, of course they have stories, but with lots of embellishment. Some things can be inaccurate or kind of overplayed. Like the whole, like, I think this movie specifically, this one's from like the 1920s or something. I believe this one plays into the like romance side of things a bit, or something like that. So I think that's where like a lot of this kind of falls away from the actual historical facts of stuff. But the reason why stuff like this is still kind of acceptable is because it is still within the realm of fiction, I guess you could say. Like, it's not, you can kind of understand that, like, oh yeah, this is not exactly 100% accurate to the historical character. And so basically that leads me into Fate's version of Jeanne. So pretty much what Fate does, if you don't know, what they do is they basically take all sorts of historical figures and they shed, I guess, like new stories to them, and also basically makes a version of them that is true to like the original person, original character, true to their like original like story, but can actually like add quite a bit to their story as well, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing in this case, considering it's more of just a creative kind of like, it's basically circles back around to respecting the original person. And so basically the Fates version of Jeanne d'Arc is a ruler class servant, and it's kind of a pseudo servant. So basically what that just means is that heroic spirit actually, I guess you could say, is using the body of this French girl, basically, is how that actually happens lore-wise. So basically it was just utilizing someone that is basically looks like Jeanne d'Arc, kind of. And that's more so with like Fate Apocrypha, pretty much. And most of my information I'm getting from the typemoonfandom.com, so that's where you can trace a lot of this back to. So what is really stands out to me about how Fate's version of Jeanne is she's not necessarily just like, oh yeah, it's this character, we're gonna be like, oh yeah, she was burned at the stake, and that was it. They actually, like, Nasu actually really kind of actually has an appreciation, I would say, just based on how he actually structured her story. It's honestly pretty accurate in terms of historical type stuff, but it focuses actually more on what I think is like the core of Jeanne d'Arc's story, which you don't really have to read this. You can find on like Time Moon Wiki as well, or feel free to pause it and like try to zoom in or something like that. I'm not really into read everything, but a few things that stand out is actually basically how she would rely on Jesus basically a whole bunch. And so yeah, like in her death basically, she was like crying out to Jesus and Mary pretty much. And so that's what happens there. And really, I mean, I'm kind of blanking a little bit, to be honest, on because I did read this earlier, and I'm actually more familiar with how Jeanne is portrayed, I guess, in her post-death kind of stuff, which is where Fate gets really interesting, because after Jeanne dies, that's where the story ends pretty much for the historical, and then you get into the fiction, which basically progresses her, I guess, character development in a way. So pretty much that leads us into Jeanne's story through Fate. So this is going to be very easily to visually describe a lot of things about how Fate portrays Jeanne. So pretty much she shows up in Fate Zero, she shows up in Fate Apocrypha in Grand Order, and I think also Extelia, but I'm not familiar with that at all right now. So I don't really feel like I can talk about that at the moment. But pretty much, she goes from dying pretty much, and the interesting thing is that her portrayal in Fate Apocrypha, because she becomes like a servant there pretty much, and yeah, like her portrayal there pretty much focuses around both her regret with how like she died kind of, like she didn't regret standing up for like what she believed in pretty much, which is what gives her like sainthood pretty much. And also like it also focuses on like kind of just her overall caring for other people, I guess you could say, which that's also very prevalent with Phase Zero, where she basically is because like Giles, as you know, was one of her like second in command commanders pretty much in Fate, is where he's more focused on pretty much. Not many people actually know of the historical character, which I personally don't know too much about him either. But pretty much like after Jeanne died, he went off the deep end, became crazy, started doing a bunch of evil stuff. But Fate Zero, like whenever like Giles is actually defeated in that, he ends up seeing like a vision of Jeanne basically just like being like I guess welcoming him back kind of, and basically like saying like, oh yeah, you've strayed from the path, come back to the path kind of. So she's basically pointing towards God in a lot of ways. So that is something that I very much like about that. Fate Grand Order, I'm not really keeping up with the story too much. I know she's involved with the several aspects of the story, especially like the second singularity, which is Orleans. So that's basically right around the time of her like campaigns in that area, I think you could say. But an interesting take on that is that she actually got summoned back as an alternate version of herself, which is basically a corrupted version, so called Jalter. So Jeanne d'Arc Alter. People call her Jalter because that's what Fate fans call her pretty much. So it's like an alternative version of her. Basically, this is also a post-death version of Jeanne, but it's instead of focusing on the saintly path, which is like understanding that like stuff had to be kind of like that. This is pretty much focusing on revenge as the main driver of this character. So it's pretty much, she pretty much is like wanting to like take over France, that kind of stuff. So pretty much everything she worked for in life, she's doing the opposite of in her alternate form. So It's kind of interesting. But I think later on in the story or something like that, like her character does slowly get redeemed as well. So it ends up just becoming like more of like a personality trait where she's just kind of edgy after a while. It's kind of funny. Like altar servants are kind of a interesting kind of situation for a lot of these characters. So yeah, there's that. But there's of course there's the elephant in the room. You've got to be careful with quite a few things, pretty much. So basically, Jeanne d'Arc has several aspects that are not really the best, and one of those is the inherent sexualization of the character. So that was pretty much done for marketing purposes, because this game was, well, not the game entirely, but like Fate Grand Order, Fate Apocrypha, pretty much. You have to do some stuff with character design, pretty much. So basically they leaned into the marketing aspect, if you know what I mean. But yeah, as a Catholic and just as a person in general, you shouldn't be viewing these characters sexually at all, especially Jeanne d'Arc. So you should pray for forgiveness to Saint Joan, specifically, like the real Saint Joan, as you would for a friend, pretty much. So like, yeah, personally I've struggled with stuff like that in the past. But basically, literally just rely on God's mercy to forgive you. And yeah, it's pretty much just keeping fiction separate from reality as well. So that's the advice I can give to you all. Seek repentance, seek forgiveness. And final thoughts, that's basically why I like Jeanne d'Arc's character portrayal in Fate so much, is because it does actually respect the original a whole lot, and add a whole entire level of like understanding of the actual Saint Joan. And yeah, basically it just leads people to like trust in God more so, and understand the value of like repentance and mercy and forgiveness, I guess you can say. And this on the bottom right here is basically what happens to Giles at the end of like Fate Zero, pretty much. Or yeah, he's destroyed, but before he was destroyed, he realized all of his transgressions, and yeah. So that's pretty much gonna be it for the video. Remember to follow and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Peace be with you, and God bless you all. Farewell.